Hi, everyone. My name's Alex Gonzalez, Public Programs Fellow here at the Studio Museum in Harlem, and today we are very proud and honored to present Studio Screen Compulsive Practice in collaboration with Visual AIDS. For those of you who don't know, Studio Screen is an ongoing program series offered here at the museum that really explores film and video as subject matter for visual artists through presenting exhibition-related screenings and conversations that explore the intersections between modern media and contemporary art. Today, we are very proud to continue our ongoing partnership with Visual AIDS for this year's Day Without Art project, and are very excited to continue finding ways to foster generative dialogue around HIV awareness through the life and work of visual artists. Today's program will begin with a screening of Compulsive Practice, followed by a conversation between curator and scholar Vivian Crockett and visual artist Nayland and Luna Luis Ortiz. We will then open it up to audience Q&A, so please hold on to your questions until the end. And I will now turn it over to Nelson Santos, Executive Director of Visual AIDS, to share a little bit more about the project. Thanks.
Hello, thank you. Thank you all for coming. We've seen this film so many times now at the office, but every single time there's like something new in it, so I'm always excited to share this with the new group. So I'm Nelson Santos, the Executive Director at Visual AIDS, and again, this afternoon we'll be screening Compulsive Practice, which was this year's Day Without Art 2016 film for the 27th annual Day Without Art. As many of you know, Visual AIDS promotes HIV and AIDS awareness with the visual arts and supports artists living with HIV/AIDS. The first Day Without Art was on December 1st, 1989, to coincide with the second annual World AIDS Day. Day Without Art was conceived as a day of action and mourning in response to the AIDS crisis and uses the power of art to bring international attention to the pandemic. So though much has changed since then, we all know that AIDS is not over, and to today's show coincides both historical activism around HIV/AIDS and contemporary responses to the ongoing pandemic. The program highlights the diverse voices of 9 artists and activists who live with their cameras in a way to manage, reflect upon, and change how they are deeply affected by HIV/AIDS. So I want to thank the artists involved, which is, many of them are here. Juanita Mohammed, who's in the back. The Southern AIDS Living Quilt, James Wincey, Carol Lee, Luna Luis Ortiz, also here, and joining us on stage, Mark King, Justin B. Terry Smith, and the estate of Ray Navarro and Nelson Sullivan. Their bios are in the pamphlets that you have, the booklets that you have, and again, we'll discuss more after the screening. Also, thanks to Alex Gonzalez, Nico Whedon, and everyone at the Studio Museum for hosting us. And I'd like to thank Kyle Croft, Program Manager for this particular Day Without Art, for his invaluable assistance coordinating the over 70 screenings of Compulsive Practice this year. That happened internationally, from our screening at MoCA LA to the Whitney, screenings in Istanbul, Turkey, Sao Paulo, Brazil, Melbourne, Australia. And of course, I also want to thank my coworkers, Esther McGowan and Alex Fialho. We're a small staff of 3, and I couldn't do it without this amazing team that we have. So, finally, I want to thank the incredible team that has worked on this, both the film and the exhibition that's at La Mama La Galleria every day. Jean Calamuzzo, Alexander Uhas, and Hugh Ryan. Hugh and Alex are here with us tonight, everything's been at night, so this afternoon. So again, they're responsible for bringing together the content of these films and the program. And Jean masterfully created this hour-long video over many tireless months of editing and curating a show and putting a work together in the show. So it was quite an endeavor. And then after the film, I'll introduce the artists. Again, Luna Luis Ortiz will be joining us, the lovely Nayland Blake, for what promises to be a great conversation, and moderated by Vivian Crockett. Thank you so much. And so please stick around for that and enjoy the film. Thank you all for coming, and please stay for the panel. Right before we do that, though, I'd like to introduce Hugh Ryan, who is one of the co-curators for both this film and for our Everyday exhibition that's at La Mama La Galleria, which is at 47 Great Jones Street, which closes this coming Saturday. So if you haven't had a chance to see that, it's a beautiful extension of this in many ways. And also, I feel like I'm falling in and out. Is that all right? And this coming Wednesday? Yes. Wednesday, we'll have a curator and artist talk at the space as well from 6 to 8. But before that, I just want to call Hugh up. Hugh is also a freelance writer and curator whose work has explored the intersections of queer identity, history, and culture. His writing has appeared in venues from the New York Times to BuzzFeed, Out Magazine, the LA Review of Books, and he has spoken on queer museology at the museum and universities around the world. There are so many here, I'm just going to skip them a little bit. But I do want to say that he is he's the Martin Duberman Visiting Scholar at the New York Public Library, where he's researching the queer history of the Brooklyn waterfront for a 2017 exhibition, and he is curating for the Brooklyn Historical Society. So please welcome Hugh Ryan.
Thank you, Nelson. And thank you, everyone, for being here today, and all of the people at Visual AIDS, and particularly all the artists in the video who are incredible. And I want to give them one more round of applause. And a really big thank you to the Studio Museum for having us here today. If you haven't had a chance to check out the other exhibits that are up, they're incredible. I really give yourself the time to check them out. I don't actually have a lot to say about the video because I think the work is so strong, it really speaks for itself. But I do want to say one thing, which is that when we were putting together the idea for this show, Alex, Jean, and I really wanted to put forward work that doesn't get shown very often, particularly in museum settings. And we wanted to show that work in conversation with work by better-known artists like Felix Gonzalez-Torres and Fierce Pussy and Keila Beja, because we wanted to have a conversation about what work is remembered and what work is even attributed the status of art. And actually, in talking to the artists that we showed at Every Day, if you get a chance to go down there, we had a lot of really interesting responses. We had people who said to us, you know, my work has never been shown. I don't know how to show this work. I don't know what it would look like in a gallery. We even had one artist who said to us, I don't want my name on this work because I don't consider it art. And we were like, this is such the exact question we want to ask with this show, is whose work gets to be remembered as art and why? And often the very act of putting it in the museum, regardless of what it is before that, is what makes it art. And that seemed ridiculous to us, right? That it's whether or not it exists inside the walls of one building here or there is whether or not even the person who makes it gets to consider it for themselves art. And particularly in this moment right now, when I think our work is so important and it is so hard to continue making it sometimes. I think about that moment when Nelson Sullivan pulls the camera around and he's at Floyd's acid party at the Milk Bar, and he and Cherry are there, and he says, that's the new us in there, and he points through the screen at this room. And I think this is the new us, and that's the perspective that we wanted this show to give everyone, is that the work that we are doing right now is art. Your work is art and activism, and it deserves to be recognized as such. So I want to thank you all for joining us in this room, because as Alex said at the screening on Thursday, it's being in the room together that really makes it what it is. It's the recognition that we give one another and the strength that we give one another that makes it art. Doing this in community is what makes it strong. So thank you all, and I'm very excited to turn it over to our panelists today.
Thank you, Hugh. And if I can invite the panelists on stage, Vivian, Nayland, Luna, and I will read the obligatory bios. Because, of course, everyone's life and hard work is much more than the little paragraph I'm about to read. But just to give everyone a little bit of background, I'm just going alphabetical here. So to my left is, to my right, to my left is a wall. To my right is Nayland Blake, is an international acclaimed interdisciplinary artist and educator whose work is included in the collections of the Brooklyn Museum of Art, Des Moines Art Center, the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, San Francisco Museum of Art, the Whitney Museum, the University Museum of Berkeley, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Also, I must say, I wasn't planning on reading, and I didn't bring my glasses, so I'm struggling just a little bit here. But that might work. Oh, no, you're way worse than me. Sorry. His writing has been published in Art Forum, Interview, Outlook, and numerous other exhibition catalogs. He has been the faculty of the Milton Avery Graduate School of Art and has taught at the SF Art Institute, the California Institute of Art, University of California, Berkeley, Parsons School of Design, New York University, the School of Visual Arts, and Harvard University Department of Visual and Environmental Studies, in brief. So next, Luna Luis Ortiz in the middle, was born in New York in 1972. In 1986, he found out he was infected with HIV at the age of 14 from his first sexual experience. In 1988, he began his journey as an HIV awareness spokesperson for youth living with HIV at Hedrick Martin Institute and has worked at the Gay Men's Health Crisis since 2007. He then studied photography at the School of Visual Arts and has worked with photographers David LaChapelle, Lisa Ross, Nan Golden, and others. The Luna Show, which we saw clips from, is a show about the voguing scene and the people involved in the house ball community, one of the hardest hit communities by the ongoing HIV/AIDS epidemic. The Luna Show has been viewed by over 2 million people worldwide. And last but not least, Vivian Crockett is a multinational Brazilian-born independent researcher, scholar, curator, focusing largely on the art of African diaspora, Afro-Latinas. Latinas? At the X, Latinx. Diaspora and Latin America at the varied intersections of race, gender, and queer history. She is a PhD candidate in art history at Columbia University. Vivian was previously worked at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art and currently works independently with various institutions and senior scholars. Her scholarly and curatorial work seeks to assist a radically political analysis of modern and contemporary art and to foster the remembrance of visioning of cultural spaces that merge a commitment to artistic and cultural production with social political justice, collective liberation. Along with Erin Christoval, Vivian is part of our curatorial team for Visual AIDS Day Without Art 2017 program. Yes, we're planning that one already. So without further ado, I'm going to have Vivian moderate this discussion. We'll speak both about the film, and one of the things I didn't say is Nayland is also the Studio Museum's postcard artist. Is that the correct title, I guess, right? One of. Okay. Right. And so we'll also speak, or the discussion will also lead about video in a larger sense as well, too. Thank you.
Thank you, Nelson. Hi, guys. Thanks for sticking around. I want to thank Visual AIDS and this wonderful team of curators for having me moderate this panel today. It's been really incredible. I've seen all 3 screenings because I'm just a Visual AIDS fangirl and I come to everything I can. And it's just been incredible to share in the space with other people, as Hugh mentioned. I mean, the power of seeing film together. As much as I'm a videophile and I can watch films alone in my pajamas, nothing compares to being in the presence of other people, so thanks for being here. One of the things that I love the most about this compilation, there's a lot, but is the way that all these different sort of forms and modes of resistance are put in dialogue together and are really made to interweave so that we come to understand that protests and educational videos and personal documentations of our lives and mentorship and the dialogues we have with each other are all interconnected forms of resistance and resilience, and that they're given the same sort of held space together. And I really believe that our work is going to take all kinds of modes of showing up together on the streets, but also with each other in intimate and loving ways. And seeing this film in conjunction with Everyday, if you have a chance to go see the exhibition, I absolutely encourage you to do so. And hearing what he was saying about some artists feeling like, oh, this is not my platform, I think that in itself is part of the question, and part of what I want to talk about today is issues of representation and who gets represented and who gets left out of our histories and the retelling of our long, long legacy of enduring this pandemic. And so with that, I wanted to turn to you guys and start with maybe a simple, maybe obvious question, but thinking about the notion of every day, right? How HIV and AIDS influences our daily life and our experiences. I wanted both of you to talk about the connection of your day-to-day practices to the work that you later put out in cultural form, either video, photography, in the case of both of you, wanting to hear about your experience with gay men's health crisis, and also maybe this would be a chance to talk about your postcard as well. Nayland. You, girl.
Okay, well, I'm freezing.
Me too! I feel like I'm at the Gap. They try to buy all the sweaters, turn up.
For once, my grumpy old man drag paid off. So I was infected in '86. So I became obsessed with the notion of wanting to live forever and having, be remembered, because at the time, AIDS was you get it and you die. And so part of what I've been doing for the last 30 years have been, in a way, sort of my strategic, idea in my head that what I'm doing is to leave a form of legacy that somebody named Luna existed. So from the moment of me drawing and doing photography, and then joining the ballroom scene, which celebrates you even to a higher level, and then doing film, and then working at the Hedrick Martin Institute, and then doing the work at Gay Men's Health Crisis, and doing some animation with my friend Sean Atkins, and all of that, and being a part of Visual AIDS was a huge part of, just basically trying to leave a legacy. When I started doing the Luna show, it was basically me just, in a way, sort of tired of people just referencing Paris is Burning. And because I've been a part of the ballroom scene since 1988, it was sort of, my way of saying, okay, let me collect and show the other levels of people that are a part of the house and ball culture. And because when I watch Paris is Burning, I always felt like it really didn't talk about HIV and AIDS, and it was huge at that time. It was the early years. Nobody mentions it except maybe Venus, when she says, I don't want to catch the AIDS. At the pier, she said that. And so in a way, the Luna show became me interviewing people about their experiences in house and ball and how they deal with HIV and AIDS and the instance of Edwin. And so it was basically trying to collect this history. So when people type in house ball and Paris is Burning, the Luna show will pop up and they go, oh, people are still doing this thing? Yeah, because it happened before Paris is Burning, so of course we're still doing it. And so so that was one of the reasons why the Luna show was birthed. And on top of that, it was also because working at GMAC, a lot of the kids, you know, the information is interesting because when I was growing up, I wanted, I just absorbed everything, you know. And so the new generation of kids, they just, if you don't give them a quick 3 to 5 minute, you know, of what it is you're trying to tell them, it's gonna go in one ear and go in the, you know, out the other. And so we started like a mini video project, and it was basically trying to, everything was social media, so it was our way of sort of trying to tap on Facebook and YouTube, young people, and giving them the info. And so sort of that's where all of it just came together. There's also a show that we do with young people called The Lunchbox Show. It's on YouTube, and also Women with Voices. So we were doing it with women, youth, and the ballroom scene, so. Did I answer all of that?
Yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah. I think I'm still just kind of reeling from seeing this. You know, it's really hard not to be just sort of humbled in the face of people's experience. And I think, you know, I've been just flashing back a lot these days to you know, the 80s and I think one of the things that just leaps out at me at the film is I remember like the early days of Manhattan cable television, like in the teens, you know, when I was a teenager, and how it really was sort of what the internet is for us now. That it was that anybody who generated any sort of content, anybody who showed up with like a half an hour worth of videotape could get it put on TV, and how astonishing that was, and how weird it was, how much weird stuff there was on. And that was fantastic at that moment, and I can't help but think about, I mean, I think that it sort of connected up with like an art world that I saw a lot, where people were really obsessed with like video as this form of like this thing that you could start to do, and the bar to entry was really low, and so you had a lot of people doing like really boring video because it didn't cost them a lot. But at the same time, it was like it still was so associated with being on TV. And so the magic of being on TV and not looking like everybody else that you saw on TV. And now just looking at this project and just how powerful it is for for the girl to do her poem, you know, and that still has a charge, that it's as cynical as New York can be about like as a place for art. There's a way that like people's actual experience, and as you said, showing up for each other, sort of silences all of that. I mean, I feel like I'm sort of wandering all over the place with this, but it's so important to me now in this moment. I run a graduate program for photographers, and we work, it's at the International Center of Photography, so we work with curators, we work with people who have a legacy of putting together institutions that are about representing communities that are underrepresented. And it still is astonishing to me to the extent that people still turn away from that sort of everyday thing. Like to get my students to actually talk about what their day is like, you know, is really, really hard. And to get my colleagues to really be present in the moment is also still a struggle. And I think it's so incumbent on us to like bring all of ourselves into these institutions, because there won't be a record otherwise, you know. There won't be those voices are so evanescent yeah. I mean, I feel like there's other stuff I want to say about that, but I'll maybe get to it later on.
I have like 400 questions, and I know we don't have a lot of time. I have to pick. So sad. Well, I think just from the responses that both of you have given, I mean, one thing that is striking is sort of the intergenerational, right, and the notion of mentorship and how important that is. I don't know if your ears were burning last night, but they were talking about you at the screening yesterday, and Juanita was talking about doing an interview with you when you were a youth and how it's incredible to see. Is that not true? Was that not true?
No, I don't remember half of anything. That's why I'm always taking pictures and videos.
Well, thinking about how, you know, this program spans, you know, roughly 25 years, and then to see Juanita in the film and then to see you. And
was it part of the latex? Is that where you're?
Back in the day.
I would love to see that.
Mm-hmm. See the little, so it's the little seeds that get planted. See, you didn't even know. So yeah, I just wanted to invite you guys to speak a little bit about that in relationship to your work and what you do and showing up for people, younger folks, and just seeing Jazzy Khan being like at 25, being like, I need to show up for the youth, having the understanding that, you know, he was supported in his younger years, and now that's a commitment that extends forwards. It goes backwards and forwards.
A lot of that for me has been because in the ballroom scene, I'm going to talk a lot about the ballroom scene because that's what the Luna show is mainly about, the people in the culture of ballroom. But Jazzy, I met Jazzy at the Hedrick Martin Institute when he was about 15, 16 years old. So, and at that time, I used to have like, anybody who I saw a little bit of myself in, I would make them my gay children. So Jazzy was one of them, and he, you know, he makes me proud. A lot of my kids make me proud because they, you know, they in a way they're doing the same footsteps that I took. So, you know, they would like, you know, let me be responsible because Luna's responsible. And, you know, let me learn about gay history and culture because it's important to know where we came from. And, you know, so in a way it sort of made them sort of, you know, enjoy life a little bit more too, because when you learn, you know, it's fulfilling to like understand where everything came from and where it started. So Jazzy came in to work with me at GMAC, and he was great, and it was sort of like, you know, father and son going to work together, and we were teaching young people HIV prevention. So we used to bounce off of each other, and it was such a great rhythm, and we were creative about it, and it was amazing to have that with him. And so when I did the video, he was 25. I think he started working at GMAC when he was 23. And so I asked him, I said, can I do a video about you? Because what he started doing is he started doing campaigns. He started to be a part of a lot of HIV positive campaigns, like the HIV Stops With Me and some other stuff with the Department of Health. And he was on bus stations and things like that. And I was like, you know, this is so great that you're putting yourself out there so you're approachable and people could come to you at bars and ask you about last night if they put the condom on properly, you know, and things like that, because that's what happens when you put yourself out there. And yeah, people stop you in the middle of the street asking you about tips. And so I thought that I lost my condom. So Jazzy. Anyway, so Jazzy, he's just great. He's when I asked him to do the video, he at first he was like, oh, I don't know if I want to talk about it, and about, you know, and then I had to remind him that it's, in a way I forced him, I had to remind him that it's part of the work. And so, you know, he, that's what he gave me. The video's on YouTube. If you want to see the whole thing, he talks about, I think, his father, who also had HIV, and how he took care of his father, his biological father. And so, you know, he shares a lot of that as well. So it's a deeper story behind what you saw. But I think it's important. When I used to work at the Hedrick Martin Institute, home of the Harvey Milk High School, the young people there, they were always so, we were constantly, you know, talking about HIV and AIDS and how to take care of yourself and health and wellness and mental health, and, you know, if you're going to transition, you know, the proper ways to do it and all of that. And I thought that the Hedrick Martin Institute was great, because they're the ones that sort of put that in me, that seed that, you know, to speak, to live, to learn, and be is what life is all about. And so I think that Hedrick did an amazing job raising all the future gay children for the last 35 years. So, yeah, I could go on and on.
Yeah, I think that it has been really interesting thinking about the intergenerational thing, particularly over the last couple of months. You know, a lot of the students in my program are from outside of the U.S. And it just so happens that a lot of the stuff that we are teaching them around documentary practice and thinking about photography in different ways, a big touchstone for us is activism around you know, around the epidemic. And I was noticing in recent years that there was this kind of like glazed look that they would get. And I was sort of, after a certain while it hit me. It's like when I was in college, all of my like old lefty professors would go on and on about the Spanish Civil War, and like talk about like the Spanish Civil War and the Abraham Lincoln Brigade and like how, you know, all this stuff. And I was sort of like, okay, I guess this is important. I don't know, you know. But I was realizing that I was starting to see this generation of folks, particularly those who you know, hadn't lived through it at all, that they had no real way of kind of connecting to what was important about that information. Like they knew it was important, like, but in a kind of old history way. And the day after the election, I came in and we were having our critique class, which is like all of the students together, and everybody was in the same way that like the subway was super quiet and everybody was kind of like looking out for each other on the subway coming in. It was sort of the same thing in the class, and we're sort of like having, you know, people are showing work, we're talking about it. And we went through it for a little while, and you know, at first I apologized to all of the international students for my stupid country. And then, you know, I thanked them for taking care with each other. And this is the thing that's actually allowed us to start to talk about why we were talking about this other stuff. That the legacy is like, how do you show up for each other? Who is the person who's going to take care of you? Who do you need to take care of? And that's the sort of the cross-generational piece that I think is coming back to the fore at this moment. It's like, it's so, like watching this and just thinking through other experiences of mine in recent days, like, it's like, oh yeah, once again, we have a government that has sort of, you know, explicitly turned its back on the people that I care about, the people that I love, and is sort of actively trying to kill them. And that's been really apparent through the police shootings of the past couple of years, you know, that have kind of been the lead up to all of this and the sort of attacks on trans people. But it is like really brought home in the wake of the election. And the place that I'm left with is like, this is the answer. Like, this is the answer. Speaking to each other, being there for each other, being present for each other, preserving the legacy for each other and preserving other people's voices is ultimately what it comes down to. It's what we have, because the big institutions are not set up to reward that. It's like, yeah, I'm not surprised that person was like, well, but, you know, I don't even know that this is art. It's like, yeah, because you go through school and everybody tells you this isn't for you. It's like you go to the Museum of Modern Art, it's not for you. It's not for you. It's not about your life. It's about somebody else's life that you're supposed to come along and appreciate. And I know for me, growing up here in New York, it was like, yeah, you had to run around and find the people who were going to be your tribe. You had to like make up like your version of like gay and lesbian history or queer history, because there wasn't anything that supported it. You know, you had to go and find who the other, you know, black artists were, because nobody was going to tell you. And, you know, the thing about the internet is that it sort of allows a generation to imagine that they don't have to do that work, you know, and because someone else is going to do it for them, and everything's online anyway, and everybody else will remember it. And it's like, no, it's not. It's not. If it's on Betamax, it's probably not online. You know, just stuff like that you have to learn that that's the real work, is like bringing that stuff forward for the people who are coming after.
So being very aware that we don't have a whole lot of time, I want to open it up to the audience. But before I do that, I wanted to ask about your Love Happen Here project, as I think it relates really beautifully to this and to the Everyday exhibit. If you can give people some context for that, and for your Harlem postcard.
Oh, sure. Just quickly, a couple of years ago, well, probably over a decade ago at this point, Visual AIDS asked me to participate in one of their postcard projects, and so what I did was a sticker that said "Love Happened Here" with a date that you could fill in, and it was designed for people to be able to go up and stick up in places around the city. I mean, the first, you know, sex that I had with men was in porn theaters around Times Square and bookstores, and, you know, and sort of, you know, out around the streets. And I was really conscious of the fact that there is no memorial to all of those moments of tenderness that people have just throughout the streets of New York. I mean, there isn't like a square inch of the city that somebody hasn't like died on or had sex on, you know? And it's like, how do we make that legacy visible for each other? How do we make that, you know, that place to act as a kind of reminder? So that's what that project was about. And the postcard for the Harlem Postcard Project, you know, for me it was kind of, I was told growing up, I mean, two things. Like, one, don't wear yellow because that means you're gay, and and never put a hat on the bed because it's bad luck. And so, I don't know, this is kind of my ominous, like, I found like this great hat up here, and like on one of the vendors on, you know, I guess along 125th last summer, and I love that it's this kind of like lava eruption, you know, crazy hat. And so I was wearing that around, and there it is on the bed. So maybe the election's my fault. I don't know. I'm sorry about that. You know?
Thank you. Okay, I'll open it up.
Hello. I have a question for Luna. I'm visiting from Paris, and we're trying to we're building the Paris ballroom scene right now.
What's your house?
House of Ultra Harmony, and I'm both involved within video making for the scene, documenting balls and everything, and trying to do HIV/AIDS prevention within the scene. But we realize it's we're thinking about including in the channels we have more HIV/AIDS prevention content, but we realized that the interest is more for the balls, the events, than for this. And I wondered if you struggled within your channel to get as much attention for this and for the workshop you document, the events, and then how do you go around this? What are the strategies you developed to address this?
Well, I mean, that happens. I notice when I do. If you notice, if you go to the Luna show videos, the ones that the title says HIV/AIDS in the in the ballroom scene or something, those numbers of views are less than if they were an interview with the legendary Tracy Africa. So of course people don't. Sometimes people just they want to see the voguing, they want to see the glamour and all of that, and they don't want to see the information. The way that I did it, see, for me, it's interviews. What's your, is yours interviews, or is it just shooting balls, or?
So far, mostly shooting balls, yeah.
So what you should do on the side, or have another friend ask questions, as you're filming the ball or somebody else is filming the ball, and you ask the questions. And what you do is that you put it inside of the videos of voguing. So you could have like 3 or 4 minutes of somebody voguing, and then you have a quick little message of somebody from the community saying, well, HIV/AIDS is important because blah, 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 whatever they want to say. And so that's a way that you could kind of force it, because sometimes you have to put it in people's faces for them to see it. I was just in Paris twice already, and I loved it. And I went there for the ballroom scene, actually, because the Paris ballroom scene reminds me of the 80s ballroom scene here in New York City. And were you there when I was there for the Hanisha Khan's ball? And so it was just great. I just loved it. And so I think I said something on the mic for somebody else who's doing the videos. What's his name?
Sharon Garçon.
With the cute little freckles or something. There's a few people that were. There was somebody else doing some videos.
Let's be in contact again.
Well, anyway, so I think they asked me something about the difference between the ballroom here and there, and I think I may have said something about HIV and AIDS that it needs to. So I don't know if they posted that, but I remember saying something at the ball about HIV and AIDS. So, but also if you start conversations with your friends and your networks about, within that, and also, God, what's her name? The ninja, Lysandra. She would be an easy person to go to and say, hey, can we do something where people are more, can talk about it or perform it. I know for the latex ball, we always have categories that have that have HIV/AIDS information within the category. So we'll say something like bring wear the red ribbon in tribute, or so the language is in the category. So when they read it, they're like, okay, HIV/AIDS is, but let me get ready for the ball, but I have to remember the ribbon. And so it's sort of this connection that you could do too.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. But I love Paris. I went twice already for balls.
Have any other questions? No?
Don't be shy.
One more. We have time for like 2 more. 1 or 2 more.
This isn't a question, but there's one other thing that I just sort of want to say, which is that I really wish that a particular colleague of mine was here tonight, in part because I had to sit through a programming meeting where he, and this is a really together guy, informed me that according to the queer community, AIDS is passé. And it was like this moment where I was floored. And it was this thing about how clearly out of touch he was with, current infection rates. Like it was this very, very odd moment where we were talking about, trying to bring people into the institution to do presentations, and his thing was, well, yeah, I just want to stop you. You know, according to them, AIDS is passé, and you know, I don't want to be a downer, but but I think it's the thing that is the reminder to us. It's like it's you know, it's like this work has to continue. This work has to go on. Like, people can be really involved and still not get it.
Yeah, when I work with young people, for them it's like, oh, we're gonna talk about condoms again. So for a lot of young people, they have what we call the condom fatigue, you know, where they don't want to talk about condoms again. So we try to find other ways to sort of bring information to them, hence the video making and the art making and all of that. But also what I used to do is always bring in somebody who they love, from either their circle or somebody who's really popular, and just come in and talk about their experience about it or anything like that, because then maybe they'll see it in a different perspective. I don't know what he may have been going through, but but maybe I mean, in a way, what I heard actually 2-3 years ago, somebody say, because you know it was all about the gay marriage, that they shelved HIV/AIDS, and then the next thing is you know the transgender movement. So then they keep shelving things that, I mean, I heard somebody put it in that sort of context, but
as if trans people were not at risk, you know,
Right.
as if, I mean, that is the thing that was so odd to me, this weird compartmentalization of like, not passé for people who are HIV positive, like not, you know, not passé for people who still have less access to healthcare, you know, all that stuff. So
And I mean, I think that is the crux of the issue, is this idea of passés. Who are the communities who are disproportionately affected by HIV and AIDS, and who is in power in institutions? And I know you were one of the artists in Art AIDS America, and sort of witnessing all of the controversy around that, and thinking very much about Sir Rodney Sir's wonderful timeline for that show that sort of starts with Harlem on My Mind, really linking this notion that this controversial show that happened in 1969 at the Met Museum about Harlem without anyone from Harlem in it. Yeah. And sort of tracing that sort of lineage of being systematically excluded from all the sort of systems and structures in place, you know, and how it's connected to art and culture and our health and our lives and all the things.
yeah, I mean, I do get very prickly about, like, you know, various ways of being made invisible, like having to remind my colleagues that there's a person of color present in meetings and things like that, and their own, you know, that, yeah, I mean, that shows a big problem. But
anyone else have a last comment, question? It doesn't have to be light. Alex, let's keep it here on the ground.
yes.
Every day is in conversation with that show. Every day, as Hugh and Gina and I thought it through, with people at Visual AIDS, wanted to not necessarily, you know, say no to that show, but to keep building out a conversation and to imagine other frameworks by which to historicize art maker on AIDS. And I wonder if you all wanted to just think about that with us, or continue the conversation about how the video and the shows that they've seen is in conversation with that historical reckoning with the crisis that was the
Yeah. Well, I would say that I mean that I was not surprised that that show turned out the way that it did. Because I have a long history with one of the curators, and I know his thing. But I think, the Art AIDS America show. But I think, to me, the lesson out of the AIDS epidemic is that establishment institutions were made to benefit a particular class of person. And there's two kinds of work that have to happen. They are that by default, their default position is not to benefit most people. So they have to be pushed to change what they do, but to a certain extent, there are places they are not built to go. And it is a waste of energy to wait around to try to get them to that place. So it's like not only the protest, but also building the histories and the places and the institutions that are actually going to, that are actually going to speak to the needs of those who are close to you. So I think both things have to happen simultaneously. The pressure has to be put on those institutions, but you also have to be clear-eyed about the fact that there are certain things that they are just not going to do, and that the quickest way to do it is to do your own thing and to find the people who really are like allied with you. It's like that's because otherwise it's just not going to happen. Yeah.
Because we had people like for AIDS Right America, but other shows as well too have like approached us and were like, well, we just can't find any artists of color. And like, you're just not doing your homework was the main part of it. But two, the extension of that and what interests me in the show and the way Hugh and Jean and Alex curated was looking beyond those museum walls too, right? Like to include film and video, to include ephemera, to include more craft-related works that someone was saying wasn't even art to start with. And so I think it's important that we, when someone says like, well, I can't even find that work, it's also because they're looking with an institution that is excluding, people to start with, and looking sort of beyond that. And I know that sounded just like a visual aid plug, but I'm just so super proud of this show and this film that I just wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, it's not our job to make up for someone else's laziness. It's like that's the thing. All right. Yes. Grumpy old man realness achieved.
On that sweet note, we have to conclude the program for today, but thank you all for coming.